Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to Movie Goodness, where we examine life through cinema here on the KB Radio Network. How are you doing, everybody? I am your host, Kevin Reed, and today we're diving into one of my favorite film franchises of all time, and to kind of go with the promise that I made earlier this year that we were going to honor the year of 1984, which for the past couple of months I kind of slipped on, but so much has been going on I haven't gotten around to it. But this falls right in line with our 40-year celebration of the year 1984, which I feel is one of the best years of film. I'm not saying it's the undisputed best year of film. It was just so many classic films have come out of 1984. You know, we covered a couple of them. You know, Ghostbusters, the first Doom. Even though the original Doom film is not universally loved, it still brought a lot of people to that property. And why this Doom franchise that is currently going on with Denis Villeneuve and Timothy Chalamet starring in is so popular because a lot of people know about that 1984 film. And then you have Gremlins, you have it's just a plethora of films that come out in 1984. But there was another film that came out in 1984 that you can consider a classic as well, and it is none other than Beverly Hills Cop. And this film, even though Eddie Murphy was known at this time, you known him from SNL, you known him from 48 Hours, and you known him from his stand-up, Delirious, Raw, you known him. And so this was kind of a jolt into a different genre here. It's an action film, action comedy film, of course, but it was different from what we got in 48 Hours. You can argue 48 Hours was more of a Nick Nolte film than it was an Eddie Murphy film. Or, if you want to be fair and balanced, it was a buddy cop. Probably the first buddy cop film that we ever received in the genre. And so it wasn't his own standalone action film. We get it here with Beverly Hills Cop in 1984. And so when this new film was announced, the new Beverly Hills Cop Axel F, which is premiering on Netflix 4th of July weekend, I said, you know what? We're going to go over this franchise. We're going to celebrate this franchise. And ask yourself the question, are you excited for this new film? I mean, Eddie Murphy is 63 years old right now, and I'm not just throwing a number out there. That's his age. He is 63 years old playing Axel Foley. So can he pull this off? Will this be a feather in a hat? Because Eddie Murphy, for the past couple of years, have not really delivered. I think the only film that I've enjoyed from Eddie Murphy in the last 5-6 years would be Dolomite Is My Name, or My Name Is Dolomite, whatever it was. It was a Netflix film. Wesley Snipes was in it. It was good, really good. Really enjoyed Dolomite, but we've gotten some kind of, I don't know how to say this, because Eddie Murphy is so embedded in my childhood. My daughter says I'm just infatuated with nostalgia. I clamp to that, and that's all it is. And part of that is true. I am kind of stuck in the nostalgia mode. A lot of those films and stars and actors from the era that I grew up with, I'm with them, do or die, no matter what. No matter if it's a good film or a horrible film. And the same thing with Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy is somebody I just enjoyed through and through. Everything he did when I was younger. I mean, the dude did no wrong. Think about it. Like I said, SNL. He was awesome on Saturday Night Live. He was awesome in 48 Hours. He was awesome in Trading Places, Coming to America, Beverly Hills Cop, The Golden Child, all these films that just shaped the 80s and early 90s, I would say, because after that, after the early 90s, it started to kind of dwindle a little bit when it came to Eddie Murphy films. I mean, Nutty Professor aside, they were few and far between, very few and far between. But I mean, all those films from his career, the start of his career, he was money in the bank, man. When the Eddie Murphy film came out, that was that. It was everybody else get out the way, let Eddie cook. Harlem Nights. Harlem Nights. I rewatched that. I don't know when that was. About 2 or 3 weeks ago. It just randomly was on, and I was like, man, I haven't seen this in a while. And so I watched it, and it wasn't as good as I remembered. I loved it back then, and it wasn't bad. It wasn't a bad film, but it just didn't have that same impact that it did back when it came out. And that's a film that he directed. I think the only film that he directed in his career. But Beverly Hills Cop, that was his baby. That is his baby. And he has been pretty good in these films. There's only 3 at the time of this recording that I can review. So I'm just going to review the first 3 films in the Beverly Hills Cop franchise. And of course, we're going to review Beverly Hills Cop Axel F when it's released on Netflix July the 3rd. But this character of Axel Foley is one of my favorite cinematic characters. I will put Axel Foley up there with Indiana Jones. I will put him up there with, and this is my personal list, people. My personal list. Don't freak out. Like this is etched in stone. This is my list. And so I will put him up there with Indiana Jones and Han Solo, coincidentally played by the same person, Harrison Ford, as iconic cinematic heroes. There are a lot. I'm not going to go through a list because that's not what this show is today. But Axel Foley is one of those characters. It's something about the charisma and the charm of Eddie Murphy that he brings to this character that is second to none, that you don't see on screen and from nobody. Nobody can pull this off. Nobody can balance comedy and action and even, dare I say, drama in one performance, in one film from the same character and make it work. Eddie Murphy does that. And it's especially with this character. Yes, Akeem in Coming to America was an awesome character. Professor Clump was an awesome character, and all of the other characters that he played in that film. But as far as one singular character who can pull off so much, do so much, wreak so much havoc in these action films, in these 80s action films, which is a genre within itself, and stand out. Because let's not forget, around this time, you had Sylvester Stallone doing his thing with the Rockies and the Rambos. You got Arnold Schwarzenegger with the Terminators and the Commandos all around, and Predators around this time. These big, muscular, straight out of the Gold Gym, swole action heroes that you can see taking on an army and winning, being a one-man army and succeeding. And you have little old Eddie Murphy. And he manages to hold his own in this genre, in this time period where big action heroes they look like WWE wrestlers, it's a joy to see. And personally, it was a joy to see a black man in these type of roles. Because we didn't get that, the black community. We didn't have that. We still sparingly have it, it's hard to find a black actor in a mainstream role in an action film at any point in time in history. I mean, there's not a lot. You take away Eddie Murphy, what's the next one we have? Wesley Snipes. He pretty much took it over in the 90s. And then after Wesley Snipes, who? You know, Denzel dipped his toe in it a little while, you know, but he was older by the time he got into the real action films with the Equalizer franchise and stuff. And then we had Chadwick Boseman, R.I.P., you know, as Black Panther. But, I mean, other than that, what we had? We didn't have any. We didn't have that many, but Eddie Murphy was the first. And it all started in 1984 with Beverly Hills Cop. And so, in honor of the release of Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F, we're going to review this entire franchise, movie by movie, breaking down how this came to be and how good each of them came out. I was going to rank them, but I was, nah, it's not fair because I hadn't seen the fourth film yet. So I'll hold off on that, but we're going to go over them. But first, let's jump into how Beverly Hills Cop came to be. And this goes back to 1977. This is how far back that this film was in Hollywood. The script for it was floating around trying to get produced. It took them almost 10 years to get it off the ground. And that's a lot of films. This isn't out of the norm. A lot of movies that we see today have been in development for 10, 15, 20 years, believe it or not. But Beverly Hills Cop is no exception. Back in 1977, Paramount executive Don Simpson came up with a movie idea about a cop from East LA who transferred to Beverly Hills. Daniel Block, a screenwriter, was called in to write the screenplay. Block pitched his idea to Simpson and Paramount Pictures in 1981 under the title Beverly Drive, about a cop from Pittsburgh named Ellie Axel. However, his script was a straight action film, and Bach was forced to make changes to the script, but after a few attempts on the project, it was stalled. After the success of Flashdance in 1983, Simpson saw the Beverly Hills film as his next big project. Daniel Petrie Jr. was brought in to rewrite the script, and Paramount loved Petrie's humorous approach to the project, which the lead character, now called Axel F from Detroit. Producer Jerry Bruckheimer claimed that the role of Axel Foley was first offered to Mickey Rourke, who signed a $400,000 hold contract to do the film. And so that was the first ball there. That was the first piece, because there's a lot of people who were cast as Axel Foley before we got to Eddie Murphy in this film. And a lot of them, you was like, what? And then wait till you hear the directors' names. It's really going to blow your mind on who was initially attached to this project. Yeah, Mickey Rourke, he was paid $400,000 and didn't do nothing. he didn't do nothing, but he got paid regardless. When revisions and other preparations took longer than expected, Mickey Rourke had to leave the project to do another film. Speaking of directors who were attached, Martin Scorsese was offered and was close to taking the job, but he felt that it was too close of a concept to Clogan's Bluff, so he ultimately declined. David Cronenberg was also offered to direct the film, and he turned it down. David Cronenberg, I'm sorry, he directed The Fly. You know, all those body horror. I think he directed Scanners, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that would have been an interesting take on the Beverly Hills Cop film. Another person who actually took the role of Axel Foley after Mickey Rourke couldn't do it, Sylvester Stallone. Of course, it's an 80s action film. You're going to go for one of the best 80s action stars, and Sylvester Stallone was considered for the part of Foley. Good old Sly gave the script a dramatic rewrite, removing all the story's humor and turning Beverly Hills Cop back into a basic standard action movie. In one of the previous drafts written by Sylvester Stallone, the character of Billy Rosewood was killed off in halfway through the film. So that's one major change. Stallone also renamed the character's name from Axel Foley to Axel Cobretti. And I want you to keep that name in mind because we're going to revisit that in a couple of seconds. Stallone has said that the script for Beverly Hills Cop would have looked like the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan on the beaches of Normandy. Believe it or not, the finale was me in a stolen Lamborghini playing chicken when an oncoming freight train being driven by the ultra slimy bad guy. I'm glad they didn't go with that. I'm glad that they decided to move on from that. The reason I wanted you to remember the changing of the character's name is because when either Paramount decided to move on or Sylvester Stallone decided to move on, or they equally did it at the same time, Stallone took that idea and brought it to another movie, and that was his version of Beverly Hills Cop, none other than Cobra, where the character name was Cobretti. So he took it and used it elsewhere. Well, I mean, it's good. Recycling, people. Recycle. But other names that were attached or were considered for the role of Axel Foley: Richard Pryor, Al Pacino, and James Caan. Harrison Ford was offered the role of Axel Foley, but he turned it down. But ultimately, they went with the fresh young star, Eddie Murphy. The film was budgeted for $14 million, including $4 million for Eddie Murphy, and was completed for around $13 million. Production began in May of 1984 and continued into the summer, taking place mostly in and around Los Angeles. The opening scene was filmed over several days in Michigan, in Detroit, and nearby Wayne. Many scenes set in Beverly Hills were shot in Pasadena, as the city of Beverly Hills prohibited filming after 10:30 p.m. Beverly Hills Cop, 1984. It is a buddy cop action comedy film. It is directed by Martin Brest, and it stars, of course, Eddie Murphy as Axel Foley, who is a street-smart Detroit detective who visits Beverly Hills, California, to solve the murder of his best friend. Also starring in this film, Judge Reinhold, John Ashton, Ronnie Cox, Paul Reiser, Jonathan Banks appears in supporting roles as well. And this is the first film in the Beverly Hills Cop franchise, which shot Eddie Murphy into international superstardom. And when you adjust for inflation, it is the highest grossing rated R film in the United States since 1977, grossing $730 million if it was released this year in 2024. Before we go into the review, let me just start off by saying, I remember in 1984, it was normally on Saturdays, me, my sisters, my brother, we would go to the movies. And we never agreed on, of course, I'm the youngest, so I didn't have any input, but they never could agree on what movie to go see. And normally I would follow behind my sisters and, trust their judgment, because honestly, my brother didn't really go to the movies that much. It was more or less my sisters. So that's where I went to the movies. And my brother did want to go to the movies. He wanted to see Beverly Hills Cop. But my sisters wanted to see Desperately Seeking Susan. I remember this like it was. I'll never forget this because it was one of the biggest mistakes of my life. I went. I decided because I had to pick which one to go. Go with my sisters because the movie started at the same time or whatever. I either go with my sisters to see Desperately Seeking Susan with Madonna, or go see Beverly Hills Cop. I chose Desperately Seeking Susan. And I don't know why. Now, keep in mind, people. Keep in mind, I'm 5, 6 years old. I'm not thinking. I'm thinking Madonna. Madonna was the biggest thing out there around that time. You know, I'll go see that. Oh my God! It did. The movie wasn't good because I couldn't follow that movie. I didn't know anything. To this day, I have not revisited that film since that day. I have never seen Desperately Seeking Susan again. A lot of you who are listening probably don't even know that movie exists, but it does. But anywho's, nothing sucked more than to see the joy and the laughter coming out of my brother and leaving out of that theater completely happy, talking about that movie and talking about what Eddie Murphy was doing and all of the action and all this and all that. And I'm sitting there like, I just sat there for 2 hours watching a girl with amnesia think she's Madonna or whatever. I don't even remember the movie altogether. I'm like, man, what was I thinking? And keep in mind, I'm a young kid. It isn't like I can go back and watch it again or try to go watch it, period. I couldn't. I had to wait or my brother take me again, and that wasn't going to happen. And so I didn't get to see Beverly Hills Cop until it came on TV, or I think my dad rented it on VHS, and I think that's how I saw it, maybe a year later. And so, yeah, that's how I came to Beverly Hills Cop. But this film was so much joy, man. This was an exciting film. It comes on just with excitement. You have Eddie Murphy playing Axel Foley. He's on this undercover sting, trying to sell cigarettes out of the back of a truck, and it goes belly up like it always does for Eddie Murphy in these films, and the crooks start to run. And they take off in the truck, and Eddie Murphy is still on back of the truck, and he's hanging on, and they're going through the streets of Detroit, and he's hanging on the back of this truck with the cigarettes coming out the bag. Police are following, and I'm like, man, this is amazing. This is Eddie Murphy. You know, this is an Eddie Murphy movie, and it was so cool. It was real cool to watch that. The dynamic with Detective Todd, or Inspector Todd, who is a real detective now. He was a real he passed away, God rest his soul, but he was an actual police officer for the Detroit police department at one time, and he even ran for mayor, I believe, of Detroit, if I'm not mistaken. He lost, but I think he ran in 2000 somewhere. It was early 2000s, but he passed away in 2016. These 3 Beverly Hills Cop films are the only movies he ever was a part of. He didn't acting. He wasn't in acting for the acting. That wasn't his thing. But he killed this role, man. I loved him as Inspector Todd. You know, you couldn't tell that he wasn't an actor. If that's how he was in real life, God help the police department who worked under him. But he was something else, man. The dynamic between him and Eddie Murphy was perfect. What attracts me to this role, to this character, to these films, is Eddie Murphy's ability to come off as goofy and silly and just a goof, but he really is smart. You know, the way that they display him using his detective skills, you know, it's not just happening on to situations that we find in typical action films, especially in this era. You know, a detective just stumbles upon clues or runs into the killer by happenstance or something like that. But no, no, no. He actually does the legwork here. He actually goes and investigates. He goes and search warehouses and piece together evidence and all this stuff that you can honestly say is police work. And he shows how intelligent he is by shocking everybody around him, because everybody look at him as a thug with a badge, you know, just a whatever. But except for Inspector Todd, because it's I can't get it out. Inspector Todd sees it in him. He knows how good of a cop that he is. That's why he's infuriated by how much mess he leaves behind in his investigations. But he knows that Foley will get the job done. And I love that. I love that about his character. I mean, I just can't express how much joy it is to see that character do what he do on screen. The dynamic between Foley and Rosewood and Taggart, those three, it's like the Three Stooges, you know. You know, it's Eddie Murphy, Judge Reinhold, and John Ashton. To see them bounce off, they couldn't be any different from each other. You know, yes, of course, the ethnicity and all that. Yeah, we know that. But I'm talking about personality-wise and how they conduct themselves. And, you know, they're all police officers, but Taggart and Rosewood are by the book, you know, dotting I's, crossing T's, don't ruffle any feathers. They do their job and go home. And Eddie Murphy is by any means necessary. You know what I'm saying? It's cool to see them work together, and he teach them how police work truly is. You know, because in Beverly Hills, they don't really encounter the stuff that he encounters in Detroit. You know, so it's a different way of policing in Detroit. You know, Rosewood and Taggart wouldn't last a week in Detroit in the style of police work that they do. You know, so that's the joy of watching that arc in this film. When it started off, they see him as one thing, but when this film ends, they are brothers in arms. They are brothers, period. You know, they've grown to respect and love one another, which continue to grow throughout all these films. And once again, great job directing by Martin Brest. The script was tight. It never lagged. Like, this was a different action film for the 80s. You know, the 80s is known for muscles and blowing up. You know, blowing up everything. It really wasn't any detective work. It was just going to kill the bad guy type situations. This wasn't that. This was so much more. The comedy, you know, so it's so many quotable lines and memorable scenes to come out of this film and the others, but this film especially. I absolutely love Beverly Hills Cop, and it is truly a classic in my humble opinion. Really no negatives in the film. I rewatched all of them for this review, and I just could not find a flaw in this movie. This is one of the best action films from that era. Is it dated? I guess that would be a flaw. It's a little dated in areas. I mean, it's 40 years old. Of course it's going to be dated. And so if that's what if I got to put that on the evaluation, I guess I'll go ahead and ding it for that. But aside from that, I love the villain, I love the story, I love the character development, and the chemistry between all the actors were pinpoint accurate. Beverly Hills Cop, released in the great year of 1984, gets a letter grade of an A. Yes, it is one of the best Eddie Murphy films in his filmography. I know a lot of people throw up Coming to America and Nutty Professor and all that good stuff. All of them are great, but this was great because of the dynamic of this character. How poignant of a character this is. This character is still going. This character is still going. We're getting another film out of this franchise. That's how good of a job Eddie Murphy has done with this character. And so I am all in on this new one coming up. But yes, man, this is one of my favorite Eddie Murphy films or franchise, to be honest with you, because we're about to dive into the sequel to Beverly Hills Cop, aptly titled Beverly Hills Cop 2. That honestly, as much as I loved, and you just heard how much I was gushing and bubbling over the first film, the second film, you can argue, is better. The second film, the sequel, was better in areas. I'll say in areas, but I'll expound on those as we go into the review. But yes, Beverly Hills Cop 2, which came out in 1987. This go around, it is directed by Tony Scott, and it stars yet again Eddie Murphy as Axel Foley. It's the second installment into this film franchise, and Eddie Murphy returns as Detroit police detective Axel Foley, who reunites with Beverly Hills detectives Billy Rosewood and John Taggart to stop a criminal organization after Captain Andrew Bogomil is shot and severely wounded. Now, this go around, I didn't have the choice between Madonna and Eddie Murphy. I knew full-fledged what I was going to get into. I knew what I was picking. I knew I wanted to see Beverly Hills Cop 2. And this was in an era where sequels were kind of sporadic. You know, we didn't get automatic sequels like we get nowadays. Nowadays, you know that a film is set up for a trilogy, not just a sequel, but 3 films right off the bat. And so back in my day, when I was growing up, it was exciting to find out that there was a sequel to a film that you enjoyed, that I enjoyed. You know, I remember when I found out that they were making a Lethal Weapon 2, which came out, I think, not too long after this. But I was super excited. And, you know, there was distance between the films. You know, normally it'd be about 3-4 years. In some cases, 5, 6, 7 years before you get a sequel. And I enjoy that aspect of that era where we got those films, and there was some time. There was time to chew on the original film. And the original film didn't set up sequels. You know, think about Terminator. You know the insanity that came when they announced Terminator 2, when that first teaser trailer dropped. I remember being in the theater just like, wait, we're getting another one? Another Terminator? You know? And so, and that's another film from 1984, Terminator. That was the one I was trying to think of earlier. But anywho's, yeah, it was exciting when you found out about a sequel. And it was exciting when I found out that Eddie Murphy was going back into the world of Beverly Hills Cop. And once again, Eddie Murphy was still on top of the world at this point. He was still money. You know, everything that he touched turned to gold at this point of his career. And so for him to go back and do this film, to play Axel Foley once again with a different director, Tony Scott, who at this time he had made Top Gun. And so you know that it's going to be very action oriented. He is an action guru, at least he was. God rest his soul, Tony Scott, the brother of Ridley Scott. But he is a very action-oriented director. And so there was going to be much more action in this film on top of the Eddie Murphyisms that you're going to get. And that just added to my excitement for this movie. Now, how this film came to be, Paramount Pictures had planned to make a TV show based off of the first film. and it was going to star Eddie Murphy. Now, Eddie Murphy turned down the TV series. He didn't want to do a TV show, but he was willing to do a sequel. And so Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer hired Tony Scott to direct due to their success of the 1986 blockbuster Top Gun, which starred Tom Cruise. The film was originally to be set and filmed in London and in Paris. However, the script was rewritten after Eddie Murphy expressed his reluctancy to film outside of the United States. So Eddie Murphy's salary to star in this movie was $8 million. Let's not forget, he made $4 million to do the first Beverly Hills Cop. And so he doubled that for the second film. The budget of this film was $27 million. Ronnie Cox was going to have more screen time in this film, but due to his role in RoboCop at the time, he had to kind of cut down his role. That's why his character was incapacitated. He was shot and was in the hospital for the entire film, and because he was off filming RoboCop. Filming began in November of 1986, and it finished in March of 1987 after filming for 135 days. Now, here's a quote from the film's editor, Billy Weber, who worked on the film and had some interesting tidbits that I wanted to share. Martin Brest had passed on the sequel. Martin Brest is the one who directed the first film. He passed on the sequel, and Tony Scott was available, so he was hired. But he wasn't a comedy guy. So after running the first cut of the film, Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer looked around and shrugged and said, it wasn't a comedy. It was played like a straight action movie, which makes sense because Tony Scott is a action guy. And that's what he knew how to do best. You know, he stuck with what he knew. And so it was really action heavy. He went on to say that we just never had a great script, and it never had a chance of being as good as the first movie because the script never got there. They rewrote the script after the first screening, and more jokes were shot and added into the film, and it brought it up just a little bit. Eddie also started to act up on set. The prima donna behavior was starting to show, and he was always late for filming, but he got along great with Tony Scott. That's the quote from Billy Weber, who was the editor on Beverly Hills Cop 2. Now, this isn't the first time I've heard of Eddie Murphy having that, you know, kind of pompous attitude on a film set around this time. You have to think, you have to really think. Eddie Murphy was a box office just star. You know, there's no other way to put it. He was a box office star. Every film that he made was a hit. Every one in his entire career up to this point. And so he had the attitude that he could do what he wants. You know, a lot of that still goes on with actors these days. I just saw a report. Well, not just. It was about a month ago. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has this same behavior on set, allegedly. And so everybody who feels they are a star, that they're bigger than the movie itself, they tend to have that attitude. But as of late, you know, there's been reports of, you know, especially on his last few films. I'm talking about Eddie Murphy. His last few films, as he's gotten older and wiser and humble, you know, he has changed his tune, flipped it. You know, he's not that prima donna on set as he used to be. And so it is good to hear that him and Tony Scott did get along on set, though. It kind of contradicts, because if you were late to filming and acting up on set, that's normally a formula for discourse between the director and the star. But if they got along on set, I don't see where Eddie Murphy was this much of a problem. But hey, that's just one person's opinion. That's the editor. And so, who knows? It could be something different. I wasn't there. And so I can only go by what he says. But that's besides the point. Let's jump into the review of Beverly Hills Cop 2, a film that is the second in the Beverly Hills Cop franchise. This go around, it is super action heavy, as they've said throughout the production here, that Tony Scott is known for action, and that's what he brought to the table. And the action in this film is outstanding. I love the action sequences, the bank robberies, or the alphabet crimes that take place throughout the film, the shootouts at the end, or the car chases and all this. All that was great. All that was great. And I even loved the comedy. This movie, even though they described it was hard to get made, the script wasn't right. They had to do multiple reshoots to get it where it was. Kind of Frankenstein monster this thing and put it together. I actually enjoyed this movie. Is it better than the first? I don't know if I would say it's better than the first, but it was fine for that time period, and it holds up in a lot of areas. But to be fair, in a few areas it don't hold up in either. And so take that what you will. This film didn't have that same charm, at least not the film, but Axel Foley didn't have that same charisma that he had in the first film, even though Axel Foley is still Axel Foley. Eddie Murphy is still playing this character the way he played him back in 1984. But there were so many differences. The detective work wasn't as crisp as it was in the first film. It was kind of goofy and silly. The comedy that they tried to incorporate into the film was it felt forced, and I was saying that when I rewatched it a couple of weeks ago. Well, actually last week when I rewatched it, I was like, man, it feels a little forced. And then when I did the research for this show about the film, it fits because it actually was forced, and it feels like it, but not from Eddie Murphy, because Eddie Murphy knows how to play it. But it was from other aspects, like Judge Reinhold's character of Billy Rosewood. It just felt silly. It felt cartoonish how his character changed from the first film to the second film. He was funny, he did some funny things, but it was completely different from the way he was in the first film. That kind of pulled me out of it. Taggart, he was kind of dragging along with him instead of being a part of this trio. It just came off as silly. Those two characters came off as kind of buffoonish compared to the charisma and the charm of an Eddie Murphy, which, I'm not expecting them to get to that level. Just like in the first film, they didn't get to that level, but they played it straight. And that was a good contrast to Eddie Murphy's style and their style, and it felt like in this film that they were trying to match that style, and it didn't work. But I still enjoyed the chemistry between the three. You could tell that they are friends. You could tell that they have a relationship after all of these years, and I'm talking about the characters as well as the performers here. And it shows on screen, and that part is undeniable. I enjoyed that part very much. So the action, as I keep harping on, outstanding. The action was outstanding for its time. And for an 80s film, for this era of film, this was great action. Nowadays, not so much. That's what kind of makes me nervous about Beverly Hills Cop Axel F that's coming out. I got those vibes from the trailer. I haven't seen the movie yet, so it's kind of unfair to throw that on him. But I'm just saying just got that vibe, and that's not a bad thing because I did enjoy this movie. You know, so I'm not knocking it, but it just felt like an '80s action film. We shall see when it comes out. But this film, being as though it came out in '87, it feels like a 1987's film, and it is super dated in areas of this film, which pretty much spreads throughout the whole film. Some aspects of this film can work in today's filmmaking. Other aspects, impossible. It would not work. The villain here, the whole plot was very convoluted. I did not like it. Even though I like the villain, the actor who's playing the villain, I should say, I can't pronounce his name, so I'm not even going to try. He's been in multiple films, but I cannot pronounce his name. But I liked his performance. I just didn't like his plan. Bridget Nielsen in this film, great, loved her, always did, you know, from Rocky V on. Enjoyed her in this film. They just that plot was so dumb. It was just a dumb plot, but you went with it, you know, but it was so silly. It made no sense. It just didn't make sense. Super convoluted, and it just did not work. But the movie did work, though. They found a way to work around it, which I'm quite honestly impressed and shocked by. That they found a way to work around a major plot point in this film. But hey, it is what it is. I got one other takeaway from this film that I completely enjoyed. I love the fact that we got more of Paul Reiser in this film, and the fact that Eddie Murphy's, Axel Foley left Paul Reiser's character the keys to a Ferrari and wanted him to drive around town while he sneaks off to Beverly Hills to investigate this crime. And that whole thing, that whole Paul Reiser subplot throughout the film was money. That was money. They could have made an entire film just on that, and I would have bought a ticket for it. It was hilarious the way he was driving around in the car when the mayor, was it the mayor or the commissioner, police commissioner? I think it was police commissioner, was trying to call Inspector Todd, and Axel Foley found a way to call Paul Reiser's character before Inspector Todd got to his office, and so he had to disguise his voice and act like Inspector Todd. Great scene, loved it, completely hilarious. It was hilarious, and it worked within the confines of this film. Only for the end of the film, we find out that Paul Reiser wrecked the Ferrari. It broke his leg and everything. It was a nice touch. I love that arc of that character throughout this film. But overall, I enjoyed Beverly Hills Cop 4. Beverly Hills Cop 2, I think it's up there. It's serviceable. It's really good. What really saves it is the next film that we're about to talk about, but it makes it even better. But this was a very exciting film in 1987. It was a 1987 action film. It fit the mold, and I'm not mad at it. Beverly Hills Cop 2, which came out in 1987, gets a letter grade of a B-. I loved it back then. It was one of my favorite Eddie Murphy films around that time because of the incorporation of more action, still had comedy. It checked a lot of boxes for me, and I enjoyed it. Now, like I was saying before, a lot of it doesn't work. The comedy works, you know, the jokes that comes from Eddie Murphy works, but the rest of the film, it kind of comes apart viewing it in 2024 eyes. But you know, the comedy works. You know, you go to an Eddie Murphy film or you watch an Eddie Murphy film for the jokes, for the laughs, you know, and that's I got plenty of that, so it's all good. That leads us to our final film today, which I thought would be the final film in the franchise, even though I was praying for years, for years, that we get another film, and we're finally going to get it in a couple of days here on Netflix. But I did not want Axel Foley to go out on this film. This film was so disappointing. I just cannot believe that this film got made. It blows my mind that this film got greenlit. I cannot believe that this movie exists, and it is none other than Beverly Hills Cop 3, which came out in 1994. This go around, the film is directed by John Landis, who is reteaming with Eddie Murphy for a third time in this film. In case you don't know, John Landis directed Eddie Murphy in Trading Places, also in Coming to America. And so this was their third team up in this film. And immediately when they announced that back in 1984, I was so confused. I was so confused by that, because John Landis is not an action movie guy. He's a comedy guy, you know, but action movies? Now, I know in its core, Beverly Hills Cop is not a real action franchise, you know, in the traditional sense. But I've not known, or I haven't known John Landis to direct any action whatsoever in his career, you know. So this was a very curious choice for the director of this third film. And now we're going to go through the production or the pre-production of this, and you're going to find out that there's a lot that took place to make this movie come to light, which is even more baffling. This is what y'all settled on. But nonetheless, after the success of Beverly Hills Cop 2, Paramount Pictures were just compelled to make a third film in this franchise. Eddie Murphy was asked about it in 1989, and he said, "There's no reason to do it. I don't need the money, and it's not going to break any new ground." How often can you have Axel Foley talk fast and get into a place he doesn't belong? But those mofos, and he didn't say mofos, are developing scripts for it. They're in pre-production. The only reason to do a Cop 3 is to beat the bank. And Paramount ain't going to write no check as big as what I would do for something like that. In fact, if I do a Beverly Hills Cop 3, you can safely say, oh, he must have got a lot of money for that film. And so we know off the bat that Eddie Murphy got paid. And during the early development of this story, there's been a plethora of different script ideas, movie ideas concerning this third installment. One of them consisted of Axel Foley, Rosewood, and Taggart going to London to rescue Captain Bogomil, who is being held hostage by terrorists during an international police convention. And that just seemed way too dark for a Beverly Hills Cop film. But, you know, they was trying to go overseas for the last one, for part 2. But that isn't the reason for this one. Somehow problems with the script, of course, and the budgeting issues caused pre-production to slow to the point that both John Ashton, who plays Taggart, and Ronnie Cox, who plays Bogomir, had to drop out due to obligations to other projects. So John Ashton's part was rewritten for the John Flint role that ended up in part 3, who was played by Hector Elizondo, and dialogue was inserted to kind of explained that Taggart was retired and he moved to Phoenix, and that ended up making it into the final film. Uh, Ronnie Cox's character of Bogomil's absence was never addressed in this film. Never. I mean, they didn't touch in on it. His name wasn't mentioned at all. And so somehow, John Ashton and Ronnie Cox made cameos in the form of a picture on Rosewood's desk, but that's it. That's the only mention of those two characters from the first two installments to this franchise. This is the same picture. The picture that's on Rosewood's desk is the same picture that appears in part 2 on Bogomir's desk. It is also on Axel Foley's desk as well. That picture, I don't know, I guess that's the only picture they took, and they made copies for everybody. But it is what it is. In an interview that took place in 2012, Ronnie Cox said that they did want him in Beverly Hills Cop 3, but he read the script, and he left it at that. He left it at that. He was the smartest one out of everybody associated with the Beverly Hills Cop franchise. Other rejected ideas for part 3 included a screenplay in which Foley has to deal with his celebrity status, you know, from the first two films, busting the crime ring and the drug dealer in the first one. A scenario teaming Eddie Murphy with Sean Connery as a Scottish Yard detective in another Axel in London idea, where his Scottish Yard counterpart would have been played by John Cleese, which sounds weird to me. Now, that would have involved British gangsters who were loosely based on the real-life gangsters, the Cray brothers, who were captured in Detroit and transported to London by Paul Reiser's character from the first two films. And Axel Foley would have gone overseas after the gangsters' henchmen broke him out of custody and murdered Paul Reiser's character. This was scrapped because producers Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer decided it was too close to the story of the 1989 film Black Rain, which starred Michael Douglas, and that's pretty much the same plot. If you ever seen that movie, it's the same exact plot. And so they brought in Stephen E. D'Souza, who is known for writing Die Hard, one of the writers on Die Hard, and a plethora of other action movies around this era. He was brought in to write the screenplay, and he originally wrote the story as more of a Die Hard in a theme park. And so he was told that each of the rides he had designed would cost about $10 million to build, and the whole film would cost about $70 million. When the box office results for Eddie Murphy's 1992 comedy The Distinguished Gentleman came in, Paramount ordered the budget to be cut to $55 million. Paramount had earlier told Simpson and Bruckheimer that they would only overlay $25 million for a proposed version to be set in New York City. One of the main reasons that the producing team parted ways with the studio. Action producer extraordinaire Joel Silver, who has, I mean, you pick an action film from the 80s and 90s that he didn't produce, you know, going back to Die Hard 2, Predator, the Matrix films. He was a juggernaut as far as Lethal Weapon films. He was a mega action film producer around this time, and he was set to take over the producing duties from Simpson and Bruckheimer. However, negotiations on a large budget resulted in production delays, leading to Joel Silver quitting the production. It was at this time that producers Mace Newfield and Robert Rami took on the project. Subsequently, the film became more about the investigation and less about the action. Production was temporarily shut down to allow the Paramount top executives the chance to get a grip of the film's spiraling budget. Originally estimated at $55 million, it was soon in excess of $70 million. Of that $70 million, $15 million went to Eddie Murphy. Uh, he said he was getting paid, and he meant he was getting paid. Just think, for the first film he got $4 million. For the second film he got $8 million. For the third film he got $15 million. And so, not a big jump, but a big, not as big as I thought he would get. You know, going by his remarks that they're gonna have to bag up the bank. But of course, $15 million is a lot of money, and especially for this movie. My God, he stole money. But let's get into this breakdown. Beverly Hills Cop 3, directed by John Landis, starring Eddie Murphy, returning as Detroit detective Axel Foley, who once again returns to Beverly Hills to team up with Detective Billy Rosewood, once again reprising his role, Judge Reinhold, to stop a gang of counterfeiters at a local amusement park called Wonder World. This movie was so bad. Let me tell you something. I rewatched all these movies for this show. I did not watch part 3. I watched 10 minutes of part 3 because I was talking about it with my daughter, and you know, she was asking me what show I'm about to do. So I'm explaining to her what show and what I'm doing. And so she was like, I didn't know there was a Beverly Hills Cop 3. I say, you're blessed, because I do, and it's horrible. So she wanted to know how bad it was. So I popped it on and let her watch about 5-10 minutes of it. I can't remember, but she walked out. She couldn't she couldn't take it. And she doesn't know anything about Beverly Hills Cop, the whole franchise as a whole. I think I watched part 1 with her a long time ago, but it's aside from that, she's not connected to this. So she doesn't care, but she knows bad movies when she sees it. This movie starts bad, it ends bad, and there's a bunch of bad in the middle. Is no action. Well, I ain't gonna say no action. There's no good action in it. The comedy doesn't work. As much as I had my problems with Beverly Hills Cop 2, at least I can hang my hat on the fact that the comedy worked. The comedy worked, so you was willing to rock with the movie, and the action worked for the most part as well. In this film, none of it worked. None of it worked. This looked thrown together, pieced together. I don't see where $70 million went into this movie. Aside from the $15 million that they paid Eddie Murphy, this movie looks bad. And this is 1994, when everything looked bad, but this looks worse than everything else. I mean, you set this in an amusement park. I don't know the thinking there. I would have accepted the other idea of him going overseas, you know. Not so much the kidnapping with the terrorist thing. That's a little too much for Axel Foley. He's not John McClane. You know, I'm not asking Axel Foley to be John McClane. But in any event, this film is asking him to be John McClane in a way, because like I was saying in the breakdown of the production of this film, they were going for a Die Hard in an amusement park feel. And that's what they were trying to, and it made no sense. It was so silly, so ridiculous. And in the 90s, or in the late 80s into the 90s, every film was Die Hard on a something, fill in the blank. You know, you had your Die Hards on a bus, Speed. You had your Die Hards on a train, Under Siege. You had your Die Hards on a plane, Passenger 57. You had your Die Hards on a boat. And, you know, you had a Speed 2. You had all of this. So everybody was trying to copy Die Hard. And I don't know why. I just don't get it. Die Hard couldn't copy Die Hard. You know, the sequels to Die Hard couldn't copy Die Hard. And so I don't understand why everybody was trying to break this formula that was so perfectly executed in 1988. Now, bringing in the writer of that film, I guess you could say, okay, he knows how to write action, real good storytelling. It's like, how is this the same writer? How is this the same writer of Die Hard? This movie story is ridiculous. The plot doesn't work. It is unbelievably silly. I mean, unbelievably. You have counterfeiters who are copying money, counterfeiters, at an amusement park using their printing machine because they print this fake money, that you can use. What was it, Wonder Bucks or something like that? I don't know. Like I said, I haven't watched it since 1994. They're using this and knock off Disneyland as a cover. You got corrupt cops that what did it corrupt for? And well, actually, it wasn't corrupt cops. They were security guards at the. I mean, my God, it makes no sense at all. And Eddie Murphy looks like he truly, 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 truly looked like somebody signed a $15 million paycheck, handed it to him, and just said, "Go stand in front of the camera. You got it, boss." And that's exactly what we got. He wasn't in it. He was not in it. This was a true paycheck film. And it's sad because this is such a storied classic franchise, in my humble opinion. This is the character that made you a star. This is why you are who you are. Now, would Eddie Murphy be the big star that he is without playing Axel Foley? I believe he would have, of course. But that's woulda, coulda, shoulda. We don't know. But we do know for certain he played Axel Foley and played him to perfection. And that is why we love this character. That's why people were willing to give this movie a shot and were ultimately crushed at the end. I mean, this was so silly. You had Surge return, played by Bronson Pinchot, who I love. I've been a fan of his, mainly because of Perfect Strangers, the old sitcom that used to come on in the 80s. I loved that show growing up. I used to watch it religiously every week on TGI Fridays. But the only reason he's in this movie, aside from the fact that he was in the very first movie for like a scene or two, and they threw him in this movie like everybody was going to remember, oh, that's that guy from the first movie that was in the movie for 3.9 seconds. But they threw him in here for and this is what Eddie Murphy has said. The reason he's in this movie is because he's the only one that can make him laugh on set. Bronson Pinchot. He's a big fan of him. He enjoys his company, I guess, and that's how he got the job. He'll be in part 4 as well. I saw him in the trailer, so there's that. And I like Bronson Pinchot, and his character was funny, but it was out of place and silly and goofy, and he was basically Q from James Bond films, giving Axel Foley all of these gadgets. And like, where did this come from? Now all of a sudden, Axel Foley is James Bond of Detroit. Why? Where does this come from? All these stupid little exploding keychains, flash grenade keychains, and his weapon that shoots out rockets and all this other stuff. I'm like, what is this? What is this? This is not Beverly Hills Cop. They could have named this any other film and I would have been all right. This could have been any other film and I would have just took it as a silly little movie that Eddie Murphy starred in, which he did a lot of those. So I could have lived with it. But I can't live with the fact that they completely poo-pooed on this franchise with this film. We had the just unnecessary death of Inspector Todd. And that was in the first 5 minutes. And you're like, why did you kill this character off? I guess to give Axel Foley some motivation to go back to Beverly Hills Cop to find the guys who killed him. All right, if that's your motivation, fine. But why was he even there? Inspector Todd has never left the headquarters in any other film. We have never seen him outside of his office in any other movie except this one. And as soon as he does, he gets shot and killed. It is so ridiculous. But by the end of this film, as I did in 1994 and as I'm doing in 2024, I have the same exact question. How did this movie get made? How did they greenlight this movie and honestly thought that they were going to have a hit on their hands? What, the nostalgia play or something? I don't know. But they were dead wrong. Beverly Hills Cop 3 from 1994 gets a letter grade of a D minus. Yeah, it came bloody close to an F. It came bloody close to an F. And the only reason it didn't get an F is because there were one or two scenes where I actually chuckled. That was it. Other than that, this movie is hot garbage. And trying to rewatch it was a chore that I did not want to go through. I tried, and I just couldn't do it. And it broke my heart that that for years I felt this was going to be the last thought that we have, the last time experiencing this character of Axel Foley on screen. Well, it wasn't. Technically, it wasn't, because in 2013, CBS ordered a pilot with Brandon T. Jackson, I'm sorry, who was in Big Mama's House, one of the Big Mama houses. He was in Tropic Thunder. He was going to star as Axel Foley's son, Aaron, in an hour-long crime drama produced by Sean Ryan, who produced The Shield and the other shows. And it was going to be Beverly Hills Cop, the show, on CBS. And so in January of 2013, Ryan stated that it's going to be a CBS procedural. We're going to solve a case every week, but we're going to do it with a lot of humor and a lot of fun. And I would say the stealth thing I would like to get in is, in a day and age when income equality and class inequality dominate a lot of the country, this is going to be an opportunity to put a young working class kid in Detroit in the middle of Beverly Hills. You can do a lot of stealth social commentary with that material. My approach is to update it and make it fun, modern, and 2013. The plot opened with a 4 to 5 minute sequence, which I think is really harrowing and very dangerous. That would be something that you may have seen on Chicago Code or The Shield. I wanted to feel grounded in that way. There'll be some opportunities for laughs after that. It's not a laughs come first type of show. So in January of 2013, Kevin Pollak was cast as the irritating, risk-averting in-house attorney for the Beverly Hills Police Department. David Dentman was cast as Brad, an honest and likable but socially awkward detective, formerly a baseball player and musician. Director Barry Sonnenfeld, who given us such films as The Addams Family, Get Shorty, Men in Black films, he agreed to direct and serve as an executive producer of the first episode of Beverly Hills Cop, the TV show. In May of 2013, CBS decided to pass on the Beverly Hills Cop TV show. I think one of the, and this me talking, I think one of the reasons why that show didn't get picked up was the fact that there was no Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy did appear in the pilot. You know, he is the father of Brandon T. Jackson's character. But he wasn't going to return. He was just there to kind of pass the torch, if you will. And part of the reason, and Eddie Murphy said this in interviews, part of the reason why that show got canceled before it even aired was because he was just doing a cameo. They thought he was going to be a recurring character, pop up every now and then, but he wasn't going to do it. He'd already said they tried this back in the 80s, a TV show, and Eddie Murphy refused. So that was that. And so that was the end of that era. For years, nobody saw it. Nobody even heard of it. But YouTube came along, and I happened to have watched it. And just like all of you, just go on YouTube, search for it, the Beverly Hills Cop TV pilot, and you will see it. You can watch that first episode, the pilot episode that never aired. And I can tell you, after watching it, I'm glad that it didn't air. Because it was deep, it was dark, well, I'm not gonna say dark. That's a bad assessment. It wasn't Beverly Hills Cop. It had some humor in it, but it's like regular humor, if that makes any sense. It just wasn't Beverly Hills Cop to me. And so it's understandable why that show did not go to air. But there's still Beverly Hills Cop Axel F, which is dropping on Netflix this 4th of July weekend. And I'm looking forward to it. I really am. I don't have super high expectations. I'm not like, oh man, this is going to be a return to form. Like I said before, at the beginning of this long episode, that Eddie Murphy is 63 years old. I don't imagine him hanging off the back of a 18-wheeler like he did in the first one. I don't picture him shooting oncoming car and jumping on the hood of it and swinging over the car and landing on his feet like he did in the second one. I just don't picture all that. I just want to see a good movie, and quite honestly, I think I'm gonna be all right for one reason. I already enjoyed the trailer for Beverly Hills Cop Axel F more than I enjoyed the entire film of Beverly Hills Cop 3. And so it's already winning with me. The trailer was enough. The trailer for this film was 3 times better than that entire film that we got in 1994. And so it can't do anything but go up from there. But I am somewhat excited. I'm just not expecting a classic, but it is what it is. But I would love to know, everybody, do you feel as nostalgic or hold this franchise in such high regard as I do? I absolutely love this franchise. I love Eddie Murphy in this role. I just love it. It's such a unique thing, and this is another type of film, a concept that hasn't been duplicated. It's been imitated, but it hasn't been duplicated. It is a unique film to set this wisecracking, street smart black detective from Detroit and place him in the bougie, upscale, white, privileged 1% of Beverly Hills. At least that's the perception of it all, and make it work. A true fish out of water story that works, and it works in such a unique way. And for the most part, they have worked, with the exception of part 3. But I would love to know your thoughts on this trilogy and your feelings on this new film that is coming out this 4th of July weekend. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also search for the show on all social media platforms. Just search for the KB Radio Network. Also, don't forget about subscribing to the KB Radio Network channel on YouTube and liking this video, please. Also, don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to movie goodness here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this dive into the Beverly Hills Cop franchise. Can't wait to speak to you on the next go around. I want you all to know that I love you, continue to love everyone, and until we speak again, you all be blessed.